As a documentary filmmaker, I recently filmed in the rainforest with indigenous people on a small archipelago south of Sumatra. The movie is called Mentawai, Souls of the Forest. I later discovered the book We Are Creatures of the Forest by Dieter Storl. That could be an interesting conversation, I thought. I was lucky. Storl accepted my invitation for a film talk. The fascinating thing about this indigenous people, this is still an ancient culture that hunts with bow and arrow, a culture emerging at the beginning without pottery or weaving. They traditionally make clothes from bark and banana leaves. They cook in bamboo tubes and know hundreds of medical plants. On a film festival, I was invited by the foundation of the indigenous people of this small archipelago. And then I had the opportunity to live and film with the tribe and its fascinating culture. But the nature is still alive and animated. Everything has a soul. Every night when you dream, the soul is traveling. But also in trance, for example, during rituals. Or even when a person is sick, the soul leaves the body and strives through the forest. For this, the indigenous people in Mentawai have flowers in their hair and body ornament like tattoos to lure back the soul. So the soul feels comforted and does not get lost in the forest, or goes to the realm of the dead. So in the rituals, healing rituals of the shamans, which are called sikere, or even through body ornament like flowers in the hair, they aim to lure back the soul.
I know this from the Native American healers I stayed with. They said, "Be careful when sitting by the water. The soul wants to travel and goes deep in. There are some who are so far gone you have trouble to get them back. You need a kind of shamanic ritual to bring them back." Actually, it is universal. It's just that in our technological society, we have lost this perspective. Our science is reductionist. Although we are far away in an infinite universe as one planet, one of 100 billion stars that are alone in this galaxy. And that is quite a long way. The inner world of our soul is just as vast. And that is a reality, not a belief. It is always said, yes, this is a projection, or projection of social conditions. It's not a projection. These are experiences. But in order to communicate it, we have to use images we know, with deities and demons and so on.
Yes, in Southeast Asia and Indonesia, the big archipelago with its great diversity, these animistic roots are interwoven in the indigenous belief in nature in Mentawai and elsewhere. You find an echo, a reflection throughout the archipelago. In Bali, for example, this idea that everything is animated is visible in the arts, because in Bali's old paintings, all space is bustling and alive. Every part of the picture is filled with creatures and beings. Because that's how they see the world. There's also Kayonan, the tree of life in Bali. And the tree of life is essential for the Wayang Kulit, for example, the shadow theater. Wayang, the shadow, is actually the soul. The flame in the coconut shell brings the shadows to life. Kayonan, the tree of life, starts the cosmic theater. This cosmic theater is often performed by priests. The tree of life brings everything to life. People, animals, plants, and even the gods all come to life through the tree of life, Kayonan. Kankulak, my artist friend in Bali, once showed me the meaning of the kayanan by a simple gesture he made like this. The elan vital in us rising. You find the tree of life in Bali, in Borneo, and Mentawai. In Mentawai, the word for offering is bulu, and buluk means leaf. So bulu meaning offering and buluk meaning leaf, directly connected. And sabulungan is the spiritual nature belief itself. So even from the root of the language, everything goes back to the roots in nature.
Yes, that's also practically universal. Take the Indian tree, Ashvata, for example. It's said in every leaf are the Vedas, and it is actually an inverted tree, rooted in the sky and reaching down, creating the world. The Europeans also knew the tree of life. That was usually an oak tree, and the oaks will be easily struck by lightning, that the divine lightning then comes through and also illuminates the people sitting underneath. It is an example, and we still have the picture with the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree in cultural history goes back to the world tree. The branches are a symbol of the 9 levels of being. Above used to be all-seeing eagle. Today we have a star, symbol of the North Star, the only star that does not move, keeps its place, and the whole cosmos swirls around. And these are the 9 different levels. 9 is a magic number and does not have to be counted. So 9 different levels. And we are sitting at the foot of the world tree. In our folk belief version of Christian culture, it's also custom here in the Allgäu, the crib under the Christmas tree. The macrocosm comes from the world tree. The child of light is born from the high heavens. In pre-Christian times, it was the sun child. It is the solstice, and husband and wife, Mary and Joseph, stand as witnesses. The meditators are the shepherds. What are the shepherds doing? They meditate most of the time. It was always like that, even more than grandmothers. If they didn't know what to do, they went to the shepherds, even if they were mostly illiterate. They've been so deep in meditation. They sensed which plants help. These were the first witnesses to this miracle of the rebirth of the divine. Actually, the human soul, you could say. And then the smart ones, the astrologers, the intellectuals, they found out later. And these are the 3 kings, the 3 wise men from the east. And they became witnesses. The animals became witnesses, ox and donkey in the manger. But some herbs they did not eat. These herbs are witnessing this miracle. There was also the shepherd dog and so on. The creation is connected to the world tree. So we kind of have that too. We forgot. We think only the materialistic science is the true world. That is so narrowing, because our soul goes far beyond the material, and that was the same in all cultures, which true academics and anthropologists of religion know.
There's an example, the term sacred in Bali. The term sacred for the temple and sacred for the big banyan tree is very different. For the temple, it is Sanskrit. For the tree, it is of ancient animistic roots. Sacred for Bali Hindu temple is Suchi, in the sense of pure. The old banyan tree on the other side is Keramat, in the sense of magical. And a magical thing about a banyan tree is that the spirits that live in a tree can have totally different forces, positive and negative. But this ambivalence is more accepted because nature has these contradictions. Both life and death are inherent in nature, and these opposite forces have developed differently in our history of monotheism. It became more a black and white painting. On the one hand, the absolute good, on the other hand, the absolute evil that is repressed, has to be destroyed. But in animistic belief, the magic tree Keramat, these forces are a lively interplay of positive and negative. Both are an important part of creation, and that can open our eyes so that we don't get caught up in these polarizing perspectives, which can lead to these religious wars like communism versus capitalism, East and West, often polarizing in such a confrontational way, that go back to this dualistic view of the world of monotheism.
This ancient culture, the old gods were different. Apollo could also shoot diseases at people. Or the nature spirits like the elves can give wonderful gifts, but they can enchant, enrapture. Or the animals, the snake, for example, which in the Western view is an evil being, but in ancient times was also a symbol of healing. And if you meditate with a snake, I did that once with a rattlesnake in the mountains in Montana, it imparts so much wisdom. Everything has two sides. It is light and dark. Day and night belong together. In the West, this was the case about 1,000 years before Christ or more. A shepherd by the name of Zarathustra in East Persia had the vision that divides the world into good and evil. From then on, it was good and evil. There were the good people, and there were the savages. These were those of Ahriman, and the good ones were those of the creator god Ahura Mazda. And so there is an evil spirit who created the weeds, and the good spirit the herbs. The evil spirit had created the beasts, the gnats and the biting fleas, and the good spirit created the bees. So it happened back then. This mentality was adopted when the Jews were in the diaspora. They were in captivity in Babylon. You read that in the Bible, and it was very sad. And then the Persians came and freed them, and they were able to return to Jerusalem. And they brought with them a lot of this dualism of Zarathustra, and also ideas that God is universal. It is not a tribal God anymore. Now there is a hell and a shaitan. There is a devil, instead of this being just a shadow place. So that came to us via Christianity and Islam, and there is a division in the Western world that is truly dualistic. And then there is the goddess Mary, pure, and has no shadow. And then the witches are on the other side. And we suffer from this dualism. That's how I still see it today. Before, all had its positive and negative power.
Yes, in animism, you try also a communication with negative forces to bring them into the balance of creation.
That's exactly how it is. We once had a good friend, Verinder Singh, who came to visit us here, and there was a chapel under the linden tree. By the chapel, there's a tree. There was a saviour in the chapel, a saviour nailed to the cross, and he was so bruised with wounds you could still see the bones, and a crown of black thorns, like a corpse. And he went in there and said, "Oh, Shiva as Shava," Shiva as a corpse, and did a ceremony there. And next to the linden tree he made a puja. It was part of the ritual for the devas, the cosmos of Hindu gods, for the celestial dancer, the apasaras, for the Gandharvas, the celestial singers, and for the animals and people, and then for the demons, the evil Raksha, and for the blood-sucking vampires and all. And I say, "Hey, why are you doing that?" And he says, "Yes, they are also part of being. And when they do their dharma, do their duty, that's important, so you can just have the light. We would burn if only there was light. It also needs this, that we call negative."
Exactly. From an artist's point of view, it's clear. The world is animated, all has a soul. We contribute to it. The colors of a soul. We contribute to creation in a world full of souls. Even from a child's perspective. But also art embraces contradictions, ambivalence. No story is true, no picture is true without this contradiction and ambivalence. So artists do justice to these positive and negative forces in their contradictory nature.
I would see it a little differently. Not just that we animate the world, but the thing is, people can decide what they bring into existence. And some things you leave outside and others you bring in. In the Western world, we are so fascinated by mechanics, electronics and so on, that we bring them in without restraint. And I know of other people who are careful, who see that and say, "No, we don't want to let that manifest itself." There is a story of 1927. A white Australian came in a car to Aborigines and said, "Look here, white man's magic." And they said, "We've known that for a long time." He says, "Yes, you don't have anything like that." But we have known it for a long time. We saw it in the dream world, but we don't want to bring it into existence, like the artists can bring in spiritual beings. The artist is a mediator, a bit of a shaman. And you pay attention. What do you bring in? It's a challenge of our time. What is manifesting these? Like artificial intelligence, for example.
Yes. What I found also fascinating about Mentawai, there are no drugs, no alcohol, no psychedelic drugs. They only have tobacco. But you really can't do it without drugs. So the expansion of consciousness is actually quite originally human. This ability of the expansion of consciousness is our basic potential, the inner ocean. Just as you say, what we can call and manifest is a great creative force in relationship with culture and nature.
Mircea Eliade was a religious scholar, a Romanian. In the 1950s, he coined the word shaman, first a term for religious scholars and ethnologists. Then it really exploded, and there were some ethnobotanists, ethnologists, who said that this was based on psychedelic plants which break the ego boundaries so your perception is enhanced. But Mircea Eliade said, it's degenerate shamanism. So do I. When the clear spiritual vision is missing, they search the help of plants, of drugs, because it is a completely natural talent. I completely agree with you that we can go out there. We always have. We did meditations with trees in the Black Forest. Every day a different tree. We sat there and our souls were empty. When thoughts came, simply sent on, no longer spun. And yes, and then you had corresponding and very characteristic impressions of the tree species. So something else comes from a birch than from an ash tree. And especially with the older, the spirit beings inside. Everyone has seen it, less the esotericists, because they have read so much that blocked their view. The best were normal people like bankers. They've never done it before, but also homeopathic doctors, because they can meditate very well, as they do in their tests of substances. We went back to the resort, and the ghosts came in the evening. Most of them didn't know what was happening, but they danced in us, sang in us. Suddenly you could dance and sing with virtuosity. And that's when the party started, because many spirits in nature love to dance and sing. They come into us and we dance and sing. We lend them a bit of our bodies and experience ecstasy in the process. This is also universal. Everyone knows that, and you shouldn't psychologize it. Yes, it's a complex.
Yes, that is also the case in Mentawai. No drugs, but dance and music, and above all, the community. So dance and music in a community releases incredible powers.
That is the community. That is important.
Our souls open to the space, drums and chant, the sound of nature at night during the rituals. And that's where the trance comes naturally.
Yes, that is something natural. But as I said, it's difficult nowadays, when we are constantly involved. A cell phone rings, no meditation, no trance possible. We drive a car. That is life-threatening if you fall into a trance, and it goes on like this all the time. And we have no, or hardly any, inner images. What do we do then? Then we have television or YouTube or whatever, because our soul needs images, and that's where we get it, from these funds. And that is why it is very good what you're doing. It's healing to say that there are other options. And after all, we live in a fantastic, pervasive and saturated world. That is what is known as animism.
Yes. When it comes to medical plants, it is also fascinating that indigenous cultures have so much in common. Turmeric is important in Mentawai as well as in India. The soul bird idol, which is also in my movie, it's painted with yellow turmeric and black ash. The yellow turmeric stands for the radiance of the sun. The Sikare also colors his face with turmeric. just like they do in India. And then during the rituals, the shaman has this slightly orange complexion from the turmeric. During this time, he also observes the taboos during the ritual. The turmeric there on Mentawai blooms beautifully and serves as body ornament. They tuck the white flowers behind their ears. The hibiscus is of course also one of the flowers they hang on the headband. Indigenous cultures have so much in common with their healing knowledge. And of course in India, the turmeric has also this great significance.
Turmeric in India belongs to Durga, the goddess in the form of Durga. She rides a lion and beheads the demons of deception, and threads the skulls up and wears them as a mala. And she is depicted as yellow-skinned, and her plant is turmeric, one of the most important medicinal plants in Indian folk medicine. I knew a hippie who was running barefoot in the monsoon time of Benares. He cut himself and could watch his flesh disappear more and more. He saw his bones, panic, and took antibiotics. The Indians would have chosen turmeric in clarified butter, roasted in ghee. They know that all plants have this spiritual aspect. All plants are sacred to some god or goddess, and that was also the case in our culture here. It's not that we've never had that, just because today we're only looking for active ingredients and perceive plants as some kind of protoplasmically growing things. Every plant either had a deity or certain spirits were involved. In the Middle Ages, this was then transferred to the saints. The best known is St. John's wort, but all plants have these aspects. Back then, the saints were dressed in the plants, the saint who is connected to the plant, and they spoke with the plant itself. There are sayings, and that is also very old. For example, mugwort. In the Anglo-Saxon herbal blessing, which is still pre-Christian, it says, "And you, mugwort, the oldest of the roots, the oldest of the medicinal plants, Una is your name." This is an anagrammatic reversal, also for the magical reasons. Anu. Una, Anu, the ancestors. You are the ancestors. You have the power against 3 and against 30. 3 is a sacred number for these peoples here and in Siberia, almost everywhere. In the New World, it's more like 4. You have power against poison and contagion and the suffering that befalls the land. So the plant was addressed by words, and only then was it taken. I know this from the Cheyenne. When they were looking for medicinal plants, they first performed a great ritual. They cleaned the ground in a square around the plant, and then they used a ritual spear in the direction of the sun, and then into the center. They sacrificed tobacco. They had a medicine song, and finally, when permission was given, took the herb. Without permission, it would be like stealing. You wouldn't have the essence of the plant, but you would only have their body, their active ingredients. For the Native Americans, the spirit of the plant is healing, not the ingredients. What is almost universal is the spirit associated with this plant. In the ritual, one tries to call the spirit, to bring him into focus, to be in a kind of trance with him, and then get permission and a blessing.
Yes, what I always find fascinating is that the Church always called it syncretism, syncretic. Syncretic if saints are connected with animistic spirits. But this fusion, this syncretism, is actually the essence of human culture and cultural evolution. The mythologies are always syncretic. Many influences merge. It's actually a creative force, creating connections, restoring, rediscovering. And that's exactly what we do when we search for roots in art and anthropology. Rediscover our connections.
It's a rediscovery, and I think many people are on the way for it. I notice that because people are interested. And the word interest is very interesting. Inter means to be in the middle, the center and focus, and est goes back to essence. Others are distractions, and when you are in the essentials, then the plant reveals itself beyond analysis, the physical analytics. First of all, the etheric power, like the energy being, but also the soul being. And most of the time we are too distracted. We don't get to the soul or even the spirit of the plant. But when you get to it, then you see how I learned it from the Cheyenne medicine people. Plants are powerful spiritual beings, and we go to them as supplicants. Not from the top down. Do an analysis and there are glycosides and alkaloids, but you talk to the essence of the plant. They are powerful beings. Native Americans have plant allies who reveal themselves to them, and that's never more than 3 or 4. Yes, the real ones you get to know like good friends, where you are prepared to almost lay down your life, and you know they will protect you. Often it's a very personal relationship. And then there are common plants, known from the Cheyenne or any other tribe. This is the everyday medicine that you know how to deal with.
Yes, in order to perceive nature in a soulful way, it's important that the hereafter is not the beyond. But the ancestors believe nature means the ancestor spirit lives in the forest, in nature.
Yes, the abstract afterlife is part of a monastic religion or monastic culture of those who live there in their cells. With holy books, that is something different from life outside, with plants and animals. It's not a question for indigenous people. Nature is animated. All has a soul. Nature is sometimes dangerous, most of the time not.
So the visions of life in indigenous tribes are often very unusual and fascinating and inspiring for us. For example, often the soul in a plant or in an animal is not a soul of the individual creature itself, but a spirit of the animal in general. The spirit of the deer and the spirit of the wild boar or monkey, it's a supernatural spirit beyond the individual animal. And this makes them guardians of the forest. Because the spirit of the deer, it is present in the whole forest and not just in the individual animal.
Yes. And it's even more so with plants. The daisies, that's how you see it in many cultures. It's like a daisy spirit, and everything that the daisy experiences is experienced by this spiritual being. So when children come along and pick daisies and make a wreath or a necklace, it will make this spirit being happy. It's not horrified that people are picking there, but these beings also need us humans to perceive them. by absorbing them into our consciousness, and by doing so, we help the plants or the animals to come more into existence. Everything is in being, but some things are quite far behind, and we call it in by admiring it, loving it, and then using it as a gift. And yes, it is very traditional.
When I then showed the movie to the indigenous community, it was always exciting to see the reactions and get feedback. After all the work before with anthropologists, investigative journalists and indigenous peoples themselves, it was also exciting, for example, the question, have we translated this correctly? Souls of the forest. And then, of course, they say, our concept of the soul is much more complex than just this concept you have now. And it is the same with the word shaman, of course, sikare. It is a simplification, just as the word soul is a simplification. They can tolerate a certain amount of simplification, but it's also important for us to see our limits. That this cosmos is still much more complex. It is just an approximation that you can try.
And yes, the thing is, to really understand, one would have to have been born in the culture, the first smells, grow up in the language, otherwise it is always just an application. I see a lot of people here who have read Karl May and are looking for a Winnetou trip and make sweat lodges, and some of them imagine they have become real Native Americans. No. Native Americans, let's say in the western states, in Wyoming, in Colorado and so on, that when they are born, the first thing they smell when they come into the world is prairie sage. This is the prairie artemisia, mugwort. It's like a primal experience. And in our place, the first thing the child was given was chamomile tea. This is the sacred plant. With the Cheyenne, it is also a plant that only the Cheyenne take. And the Cheyenne lost them because they were confined to a reservation. It was like an outdoor prison. And there they have lost their most sacred plant, which they need for all ceremonies. From a small snippet they make a tea, and that is the first thing the child drinks, and then it is connected to the original shaman, which has manifested itself on earth in this plant. And they only had one piece left in their medicine bag, the size of a finger. And that's where, I found out later, the older ones then got together, and then Bill Tolbull, who became a good friend, came to see if I could help them find this plant, which has been lost to them, which does not grow on the reserve. They studied me for a year first. I followed them around everywhere to learn. We have been working with plants. I learned plants from them, how to send the soul into the plant. And then, only after a year did they say that they were looking for this plant. And through a series of coincidences, I actually succeeded. And then it took another 20 years before they had tested this plant, and now they have the sacred plant again. This plant is the original shaman who came from the celestial wolves. The celestial wolves have their teepees. They are very white celestial wolves. They have their teepees at Aldebaran, where the red wolf is, and Orion is the white wolf. And the shaman lived there for many years, and then came down, and humans, the original humans, the true humans like the Tsitsitsas, he taught them how to hunt, how to live, how to survive. He was there for 445 years, and then he had to go. Indians would say, because of his karma, because he made a promise to leave again. And they were very sad. But he said, "Look, in this plant I will stay present, and if you take it, I'm with you." And that's why the children get it. And with every shamanic ritual, including the sun dance, when the soul dissolves, archaic rituals, when they go up to heaven, mostly flying as an eagle, strangely, and they connect with the eagles. A young dancer told me how suddenly his soul was in the sky, in the form of an eagle, while his body in the deepest trance.
In Mentawai, the soul is more in the solar plexus, more in the belly. And this solar plexus is also a nerve system, like a small forest, which spreads in the center of the body. And in many cultures, this localization of the soul can be very different.
Yes, this is different. Or you could say the soul is everywhere in the body. That is why the soul senses and feels when, if you pinch yourself here or step on a thorn, it hurts. You got soul in it. And in Indian philosophy, the chakras are the centers of the soul. The solar plexus is also important here, and that is strength, power to survive. And an American native warrior, for example, focuses his strength there. It's not in his head, but in the solar plexus he has the power. The other feeling, the expansion, is the heart, and that also has a universal component.
For the Greeks, it was more the breath, pneuma, the lungs. And in Balinese belief, there are 4 spiritual siblings with whom you are born. In the time the woman is pregnant, the spiritual siblings are still physically alive, in the belly with the baby. At birth, the 4 spiritual siblings die physically, to live on as spiritual beings, as guardian spirits of the baby. In the past, the Balinese used to spit a bit coffee on the ground for the siblings, or throw some rice on the ground. So that's the 4 siblings.
And then you give a little beer on the ground, but for the dwarfs.
You're never born alone, but as a community. You're already a group in the moment of birth.
Again, this is almost universal. I saw that in Siberia with the Buryats and Mongolians. The complexity of the soul, the Cheyenne know 4 souls. There is also a soul in the bones after death, even among the Buryats. And we know that too, by the way. The Buddhists, they are careful with the bones. They are still radiant. Among Christians, the bones of the saints are placed in the altar. The altar is always in the east, because of the charisma. And when the Iro-Scottish missionaries came here, to this region, they came to Lake Constance, where Bregenz is located. Bregenz was dedicated to the birch goddess, the goddess of spring. There were Alemanni there, and they had a beer festival. And the monks who wore their sticks bundles with the bones of martyrs. And that's when they weren't afraid of the savages. Then they knocked over the beer kettles. They weren't forgiven for that. And then the Alemanni drove them out. One went over this mountain, and it is said that a dragon lived on this high mountain. And that was the Magnus, the St. Mang. And then he has his rosary and holy water sprayed into the dragon's throat, and the dragon died. And then everyone went with him. All bears and wolves and snakes, all evil beasts. And so this mountain was Christianized. Such is the legend. So these are all legends that have their counterparts everywhere. But we had them here too, and they are forgotten, and they are simply presented as myths or something. But these dimensions also exist here. I have a good friend who went to the Lakota, even learnt their language, has then worn the costume. And the old Lakota, what was his name? Whitehead or something. He said, "No, go back. Find your own roots. You are not really a Native American. Even though you are a very nice person and understand us well. Go back." Indigenous people who still are connected to nature can guide us. That was so with Bill Tallbull. That was so amazing to see him talking with plants. I was talking about plants. That's so-and-so, and I botanized that. It has certain active ingredients. And then I realized he spoke with the plants. And that took months to fully understand. That our soul was not separated, wrapped up like in some cellophane, but that we can connect with plants and animals. That this is actually the important, essential thing. And then a movie like you make opens up the possibility that you can do this.
Yes, we also build bridges between cultures.
Yes, and that is really necessary. Emergency after all. We become more and more disembodied. When I can see that around 100 million vertebrates are used in medical experiments, cosmetics and so on. And when you see that these are living souls someone has, like this dog, you can't do that. Clamp them in the vice or cauterize them with poisons. You can't do that if you have a soul. So it's only dead souls who would do something like that. Or sacred places that are simply leveled. I was now in Switzerland, where one of my teachers, this is a new book by the way, one of my teachers, a mountain farmer from where I learned a lot about nature. This was a megalithic sacred site with large granite stones dragged from it. It's all limestone there. The megaliths were set up there. Yet I get there after 40 years and see, what did they do? They have dredged away part of it. And no idea that this was some 5,000 years old culture. And we simply have to get back to be sensitized to the sacredness of nature, to the language of nature, and not blasting away or torturing the animals.
I believe that one of the influential inspirations of indigenous culture is this idea of the journey of the soul, which can open us for transformation. No longer this dualistic worldview, but incarnations and transformations, interconnectedness. We discover how cultures are interwoven.
There is one aspect of globalized culture where you have McDonald's everywhere, and they call it one world and so on. The way I see it, every culture is like a different flower. This is so enriching. I grew up in America. There is so much fast food. The same East and West. People think exactly the same thoughts. You don't even need to talk to them. Just what is presented in the media. So Europe was wonderful for me. Europe, where a few valleys further down the road, the dialect is different. The architecture, the food. And this diversity is wonderful. Diversity is good for the soul.
Yes, exactly. And these are also our roots. Also when I'm in Indonesia, in Asia, I discover so much deep interwoven roots, mutual influence. It's always an enrichment.
Yes, that is also universally human. So in contrast to the other animals, we have grasping hands, which are coordinated with the eyes. There is something universally human about it, to bring up so mumuch cultural diversity, manifesting in such wonderful forms. Goethe said, "Nature influences our soul, like people who live in an oak forest, are different from those that grow up under birch trees." That is clear because we open us. We are inspired by the nature that surrounds us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yes, with pleasure. Shiva. Shiva in everything.